Welcome to Cybersecurity Awareness TV, episode 375, recorded November 13th, 2021. My name is Mac Jackson Jr., your cybersecurity consultant. If this is the first time you've seen our show, I'm here to discuss with you cyber news, events, interviews, and things that you could do to protect yourself against the fastest growing crime of the 21st century, and that's identity theft and cyber fraudsters. I'd like to thank everybody who's been a part of our show. Worldwide, we have audiences watching our show, learning about how to protect their businesses and how to fight back against these cyber thieves and criminals. If you'd like to find out more about my show, my company, Vanderson Cyber Group, and how it can protect your company, go to my website at macjacksonjr.com. That's macjacksonjr.com, and Vanderson Cyber Group's website at vandersoncybergroup.com as well for information on cybersecurity awareness education. In today's episode, we have a doozy one for you today. We're going to talk about, in our cyber news, the U.S. Justice Department has conducted a major arrest against ransomware fraudsters and cyber criminals around the world. And yes, folks, like we've always said on this show, our government and law enforcement agencies around the world are looking to apprehend, prosecute, and arrest these particular types of cyber criminals and get the monies back from victims that they have victimized. In segment 2, we're going to talk about the major gatekeeper of our personal privacy and security, and that's the password. Should we get rid of it? What should we do about these passwords, folks? They are monotonous, laborious, and causing all kinds of issues. There are companies out there looking at ways that we can replace our passwords, folks, with a new type of technology. We'll talk about that on Cybersecurity Awareness TV. And of course, in our third segment, we've always talked about every week, is what you can do today to protect yourself against these cyber threats and cyber crimes. But in our first report, cyber news, the U.S. Justice Department has conducted a major cyber arrest. Ransomware, as you know from the show, is one of the fastest growing crimes, and it's on the rise worldwide. We've reported on the show how companies have been victimized by these types of cyber threats. Earlier this year, the Colonial Pipeline had a major cyber attack which galvanized the communities in the East Coast by locking up the gas pipelines where companies could not have access to gas to give to their customers, causing customers to try to put gas into garbage bags and to protect themselves from this so-called shortage. And it was a cyber attack that happened. Well, unbeknownst to even the owner of the Colonial Pipeline, our U.S. government and our cybersecurity team was working in the background with other hackers on our side to find out who these hackers are, and they were able to bust this organization, folks. This week, the U.S. Justice Department has announced the arrest of 2 foreign nationals that have been charged in the REvil ransomware attack of the U.S. businesses and governmental agencies. The U.S. Attorney General, Merrick Garland, announced the arrest, seized over $6.1 million in funds in payments from these ransom attacks from these bad guys. I have a clip here I'd like to show you. Here is the announcement by the Attorney General from CNBC.
Good afternoon. I'm joined today by Deputy Attorney General Monaco, FBI Director Wray, and Deputy Treasury Secretary Adeyemo. A core priority of the Justice Department is to keep our country safe from all threats, foreign and domestic. Cybercrime is a serious threat to our country, to our personal safety, to the health of our economy, and to our national security. Cybercrime takes many forms, one of which is ransomware. In ransomware attacks, transnational cybercriminals use malicious software to hold digital systems hostage and demand a ransom. These attacks have targeted our critical infrastructure, law enforcement agencies, hospitals, schools, municipalities, and businesses of all sizes. Meeting this threat requires a whole-of-government approach. Together with our partners, the Justice Department is sparing no resource to identify and bring to justice anyone, anywhere, who targets the United States with a ransomware attack. Today, we are announcing that we are bringing to justice an alleged perpetrator of a significant, wide-reaching ransomware attack. On July 2nd, the multinational information software company Kaseya and its customers were attacked by one of the most prolific strains of ransomware, known as R-Evil or Soda no Kibi. To date, R-Evil ransomware has been deployed on approximately 175,000 computers worldwide, with at least $200 million paid in ransom. As a result of the Kaseya attack, businesses that relied on Kaseya services across the United States and around the world were impacted. 6 weeks later, on August 11th, the Justice Department indicted Yaroslav Vasinski, also known by the online moniker Robotnik. The indictment, which was previously under seal, charges him with conspiring to commit intentional damage to protected computers and to extort in relation to that damage, causing intentional damage to protected computers, and conspiring to commit money laundering. The indictment charges that Vasinski and co-conspirators authored R-Evil software, installed it on victims' computers, resulting in encryption of the victims' data, including in the July 2nd attack, demanded ransomware payments from those victims, and then laundered those payments. 2 months after the indictment, on October 8th, Vasinski crossed the border from Ukraine into Poland. There, upon our request, Polish authorities arrested him pursuant to provisional arrest warrant. We have now requested that he be extradited from Poland to the United States pursuant to the extradition treaty between our countries. Today, we are unsealing Vasinski's indictment. Vasinski's arrest demonstrates how quickly we will act alongside our international partners to identify, locate, and apprehend alleged cybercriminals, no matter where they are located. Ransomware attacks are fueled by criminal profits. That is why we are not just pursuing the individuals responsible for those attacks. We are also committed to capturing their illicit profits and returning them whenever we can to the victims from whom they were extorted. And that brings me to our second announcement today. In addition to securing the arrest of Vasinski, the Justice Department has seized $6.1 million tied to the ransom proceeds of another alleged R-Evil ransomware attacker, Russian national Yevgeny Polyanin. As set forth in the public filings related to the seizure, Polyanin, whom we also charged by indictment, is alleged to have conducted approximately 3,000 ransomware attacks. Polyanin's ransomware attacks affected numerous companies and entities across the United States, including law enforcement agencies and municipalities throughout the state of Texas. Polyanin ultimately extorted approximately $13 million from his victims. We are also announcing the unsealing of an indictment against Polyanin. Like the indictment against Vasinski, he is charged with conspiring to commit intentional damage to protected computers and to extort in relation to that damage, causing intentional damage to protected computers, and conspiring to commit money laundering. Today, and now for the second time in 5 months, we announced the seizure of digital proceeds of ransomware deployed by a transnational criminal group. This will not be the last time. The U.S. government will continue to aggressively pursue the entire ransomware ecosystem and increase our nation's resilience to cyber threats. But while today's announcements mark important successes, I want to emphasize that we all must play a role in improving our cyber defenses. This includes the American business community. Being vigilant and investing resources in cybersecurity should be a high-profile priority for all of us. In addition, when ransomware attacks do occur, law enforcement's ability to respond depends in large part on whether and how promptly the victim reports the attack. Failure to timely report also puts other potential victims into jeopardy. It deprives investigators of the information they need to forestall or mitigate other attacks. It is for this reason that we urge Congress to create a national standard for reporting significant cyber incidents and to require that the reported information be shared immediately with the Justice Department. Our message today is clear. The United States, together with our allies, will do everything in our power to identify the perpetrators of ransomware attacks, to bring them to justice, and to recover the funds they have stolen from the American people. Over the past 7 months, the Justice Department has sharpened the tools at our disposal to investigate and prosecute ransomware attacks. We have created the DOJ Ransomware and Digital Extortion Task Force as directed by the Deputy Attorney General, which includes the Criminal Division, the National Security Division, the Executive Office of United States Attorneys, the Civil Division, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I would like to thank all of our partners who have assisted in this effort, including CISA, the Treasury Department, and the State Department, as well as our many foreign law enforcement partners. Finally, I would like to thank all those within DOJ for their work. This includes the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas, the Criminal Division's Computer Crimes and Intellectual Property Section and Office of International Affairs, the National Security Division, and the Jackson and Dallas FBI field offices, which led the department's investigation.
In the United States, our law enforcement agencies have taken significant steps towards defending our country against cyber criminals. To combat these ransomware threats, like the Attorney General Gardner emphasized, the U.S. law enforcement agencies and business communities have collaborated in acquiring these cyber criminals, prosecuting them, and arresting them, and bringing them to justice. We can all continue to do our part in fighting against cyber crimes by collaborating with law enforcement around the world. It takes one person, folks, and we can help protect our homeland. In our next segment, should our society get rid of passwords? It's the first line of defense. We're going to talk about that. We'll be right back, folks, after these messages.
You can help limit the damage from identity theft with some quick responses. Placing a fraud alert on your credit reports, filing a complaint with the FTC, and then filing a police report. Taking these steps will give you some important tools to deal with other problems that may come up, like charges you didn't authorize on your credit card, phone, or utility bills, like ATM withdrawals or debit card purchases you didn't approve, like getting a letter from the IRS saying someone has filed for a tax refund in your name. Keep records of your calls and copies of documents. If these problems do come up later, you'll have the necessary tools close at hand. For more tips and tools on dealing with identity theft, visit ftc.gov/ID theft. That's ftc.gov/ID theft.
Hi folks, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. In this segment, we're discussing, will we get rid of using passwords to access our technology? We use passwords to access our technology for our personal and business life. The password is our digital keys in protecting our personal information and privacy from criminals. However, these digital keys have been a major issue in data breaches. Passwords can be hacked a lot more due to the advancements in technology and the way that passwords can be cracked with faster computers. Now, there are companies looking for alternative forms of authentication when accessing our technology. Here is an in-depth report on should we get rid of our passwords. Report to you from CNBC.
This announcement, beyond identity, free to companies, I know that you've gone the sort of free to try route before. I'm thinking of Netscape here. What's the business model?
Well, the business model is that everyone needs this. Everyone wants to get rid of passwords. And we have lots of other offerings that are revenue generating. So we thought making this free would just get rid of all of the friction for adoption. That's the primary reason.
Now, tell me about where we are in the stage of the internet, because you were a key player in probably the most important event of its consumerization, the popularization of the web browser with Netscape. Now we find ourselves, we're just hearing about this fraud that's happening in the system. There have been all of these attacks, SolarWinds recently. It's hard to ferret out what the truth is online, harder than ever. Where are we and what's needed?
Well, we've gone largely all the way, but this password thing has really been a pain for everyone. There's not a person in the world who wouldn't like to get rid of all their passwords. So that's the mission we set out to do. We basically took the technology that was invented at Netscape and made it available for consumers. It's been there for websites forever. That's what that little lock means up in the HTTPS web address.
Right.
And so we just decided to make it available for ordinary consumers and figured out a way to do it.
Now, Tom, you are the CEO of Beyond Identity, and you and Jim have been partners in business for a long time now. There's got to be a challenge here. Even though passwords, everybody kind of hates them, we're kind of used to them. So it's going to be quite a leap for people, for businesses, to give up passwords and let Beyond Identity in. What's your strategy for enabling that?
Yeah, 35 years we've been together working on this, and obviously this problem of passwords has been around that long, since the beginning of the internet. I liken it, if I can do a simple comparison with COVID. Passwords are a virus. It's how you spread that from company to company. SolarWinds happened because somebody took a password from one site, used it to break into another site, gain access, went right past MFA technology, checked in malware, and then that went back out the other way. If you had a technology to eliminate the passwords from the beginning, you wouldn't have had that surface attack area from the start. And so all of these other technologies, password managers and MFA technologies, they only exist because the initial problem exists, the password. If you don't have a password, you don't need all those other layers of user friction and complexity. And that's why we set out to say, websites don't talk with passwords to each other. Let's just go back and use that technology, extend it out. It's a known technology, extend it out to end users and make them passwordless as well.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.
According to the report from CNBC, U.S. businesses' computer users track about 40 to 50 different types of passwords and user IDs when they're using their computer systems on a daily basis. In my business practice, my clients have reported 70 to 100 different websites that they access on a daily, weekly basis where they have a unique user ID and a password. Tracking this types of methods of privacy can be laborious and very hard to just keep track of, folks. You misuse, you forget your password, and then you have to call tech support to get the password back again. It brings down productivity and the like. We need to have another way of creating a way to protect our data from these cyber attackers. In this report, there are companies, that have come up with alternative ways to protect this data. Should we ditch our password? Let's take a look at some of the alternatives. Here's another report continuing from CNBC.
Passwords are like the cockroaches of the internet. They really, despite all of our best efforts, they're very hard to kill off, and companies have been trying to do it for years.
The average office worker in the United States must keep track of between 20 to 40 different username and password combinations. With so many passwords to remember, it's no wonder why many of us use the same ones over and over, or have a running list of passwords saved somewhere on our computers, phones, or notebooks. Passwords are a very serious and expensive security risk. It's why companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google are trying to reduce our dependence on them. But the question is, can these companies break our bad habits? Passwords, by themselves, are just not that secure. In a 2015 interview with John Oliver, Edward Snowden explained just how easy it is to crack a typical password.
Bad passwords are one of the easiest ways to compromise a system. For somebody who has a very common 8-character password, it can literally take less than a second for a computer to go through the possibilities and pull that password out.
I think we're going to have a no passwords future because it just gets rid of a lot of problems. You never know when the bad guy has your password at the end of the day.
That's Kevin Mitnick. He's pretty well known in the hacker community.
I started off many, many years ago as a black hat hacker. I wasn't hacking to cause harm or to make money. It was all about the intellectual challenge, curiosity, and seduction of adventure. And then I pushed the envelope, and I pushed it so far, I became the world's most wanted hacker, and I was pursued by federal law enforcement agencies, and they eventually caught up with me, and I ended up serving 5 years in federal prison.
Nowadays, Mitnick says he's an ethical hacker, assisting companies to identify their security vulnerabilities and helping to fix them. And finding your usernames and passwords? It's much easier than you might think.
There's a site out there called WeLeakInfo.com. So what WeLeakInfo is, it's a site that has aggregated a bunch of data breaches. And so what happens is the data, namely your username and passwords that are on these data breaches, get aggregated because they're publicly available. And there's sites that like WeLeakInfo that kind of make it like a Google, where you can actually just put in an email address of yourself or a friend, and all the prior data breaches that contained your username or your email address, it actually reveals the password.
All it takes to find the site is a quick Google search, and users can get access to more than 10,000 data breaches for as low as $2. And it's not even the only website to offer these services.
Simply put, passwords are not fit for purpose for today's networked economy. They present challenges to consumers in the sense that they're either hard to remember or they're too easy to remember, in which case they're easier to mimic and steal. For businesses, they represent a huge liability in the sense that the vast majority of data breaches are caused by passwords. Either passwords that slip from an employee and expose a database, or allows other bad actors to get into their systems. So passwords, present challenges across the board.
A report that looked at 2013 confirmed data breaches found that 29% of those breaches involved the use of stolen credentials. In another study, researchers found that the average cost of a data breach in the US was more than $8 million. And even when passwords are not stolen, companies can lose a lot of money resetting them.
Our research has shown that the average fully loaded cost of a help desk call to reset a password is anywhere between $40 or $50 per call. Generally speaking, a typical employee contacts a help desk about somewhere between 6 and 10 times a year on password-related issues. So if you just do the simple multiplication of 6 to 10 times $50 per call times the number of employees in your organization, you're talking significantly hundreds of thousands of dollars or even potentially millions of dollars a year. And that's just really the IT operations costs. That's not really factoring necessarily the productivity cost that gets lost by the user having to wait for maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or even longer to actually have the password issue resolved to their satisfaction.
In large companies like Microsoft, Apple, and Google, with upwards of 100,000 employees each, these costs can quickly add up. A former Microsoft executive told CNN in 2018 that the company spends more than $2 million each month in help desk calls, helping people to change their passwords. With the details of our personal and professional lives increasingly residing in the digital realm, those costs are likely to grow. The first use of the computer password dates back to the early 1960s at MIT. At the time, computers were these huge contraptions that could only manage the work of one person at a time. This limitation frustrated Fernando Corbato, who came up with the computer time-sharing system. CTSS was an operating system which distributed a computer's processing power so that multiple people could use it at once. This naturally led to the issue of privacy, so Corbato created the password. Ironically, the first computer to use passwords was also the first one to be hacked. One of the researchers in Corbato's lab found that he needed more time to complete his work than the weekly hours allotted to him. So he printed out all the passwords stored on the system and used them to log in as his colleagues. The conventional rules of password creation adopted by companies, federal agencies, and universities were attributed to a document released by the National Institute of Standards and Technology in 2004. The document suggested that users should have a minimum of 8-character passwords, and that those passwords should include at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and one special character, and be changed regularly. But in 2017, NIST rewrote the password rules. This time, the agency suggested using long, easy-to-remember phrases instead of crazy characters, and only changing your password if it might have been hacked. Passwords have come a long way since the 1960s. With innovations such as fingerprint readers and face scanning on smartphones, verifying your identity now often goes beyond just entering a password. This comes in the form of two-factor and two-step authentication.
There's three forms of authentication. One is what you know, such as a password or a PIN. The second thing is what you have, so possession of a device in your hands. And the third means of authentication is who you are, like a biometric. The password alone is the highest risk way of authenticating, and that leads to phishing and data breaches and all the nefarious things we see on the web today. Any form of two-factor authentication is better than passwords alone. What I'd want to note, though, is that not all two-factor authentication is created equal. Things like getting SMS messages, so a text message with a PIN code, is both inconvenient but also can be spoofed and is not a foolproof means of second-factor authentication.
NIST even restricted the use of one-time passwords being sent over SMS as a means of two-factor authentication. For something to be two-factor versus two-step, the authentication elements must come from two separate categories. An example of two-factor authentication is withdrawing money from an ATM. First, you insert your bank card, something that you possess, and then you are asked for a PIN, something that you know. Biometrics are the newest form of authentication and have risen in popularity thanks to smartphones that include fingerprint readers and face scanning cameras. Meanwhile, digital assistants like Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant have advanced voice recognition technologies. In fact, a number of banks, including Chase and Barclays, now allow their customers to verify their identity using voice biometrics. When customers call in, their voice is automatically matched to a previously recorded voice print that's made up of more than 100 characteristics such as pitch, accent, and shape of your mouth.
As this report explains, password access can be developed using facial recognition and also voice recognition technologies. It's a form of biotech technologies that companies are utilizing as an alternative to the old-fashioned password numbers that we have to enter into our computer systems. But can this be viable? Will hackers find another way around this? Or will this create another nuisance for us in society? This is something that we will definitely study and hear on this show as well. We'd like you to stay tuned of what we're talking about and how these companies have developed this type of technology. The report will continue. This report, that is, will continue on how companies are utilizing alternative ways to ditch the password. Here's another report from CNBC.
One organization that's been at the forefront of bringing two-factor authentication standards to the masses is the FIDO Alliance. The FIDO Alliance, which stands for Fast Identity Online, is a consortium of more than 250 companies who are working together to reduce the industry's reliance on passwords by standardizing two-factor authentication.
This past year, we've seen FIDO become a core part of the Android and Windows operating systems, meaning that any Android 7 or later handset or any Windows 10 machine, you can leverage actual onboard biometrics of that device, so a fingerprint reader, a face scanner, whatever it might be, to log in rather than using passwords.
Other companies that work with the FIDO Alliance include eBay, Facebook, Twitter, PayPal, and Bank of America. Even the US government has adopted the standard. FIDO's big advantage over other standards comes down to where it stores users' personal information.
The core problem with passwords is that they reside on a server. The problem with that is that when it sits on a server, they can be stolen by a hacker. Additionally, someone can impersonate you quite easily, either by phishing your credentials or by buying your credentials off the dark web and then trying to stuff them into the account. Everything FIDO does is local on the device, which does a couple things. One, it's easier, but two, perhaps most important, it protects your privacy. Right? So you can always change a password if it's hacked, but you really can't take your face back. You can't take your fingerprint back. So it's very important that companies that are using biometrics use local match biometrics, meaning match on device, which is what FIDO supports, to protect user privacy and have enhanced user experience.
Microsoft has been hinting about getting rid of the password for years.
Now let me move over to my Surface Pro 4. I don't know if you noticed what happened. It recognized that I was just standing in front of the computer and it logged me in. And this is the power of Windows Hello, where it does the face recognition and logs you right in. I mean, think about one of the biggest issues of security is passwords. So one of the things that we are working on is a world where passwords are not going to be the ones that get hacked, but you really have other biometrics that really help us secure our computing interfaces.
Microsoft sees 6.5 trillion hacking incidents per year. That's why 90% of its employees can now log into the corporate network without a password.
We are on a mission to be passwordless. We've built passwordless technology into the OS, and we tell customers, of course, that it's much more secure than actual passwords, because about 70% of phishing attacks today still are caused by stolen passwords. So what we recommend is that customers use biometrics. At Microsoft, we use Windows Hello for Business. I look at my computer to log on in the morning. That's how I authenticate. If I'm on my phone, I'm using my thumbprint. We don't see our passwords anymore, because that is the user and the password are the weakest link in your security system.
Microsoft introduced Windows Hello to customers in 2015, with its devices running Windows 10. Windows Hello allowed users to ditch the password and log into their devices with just their face, fingerprint, or PIN. Like FIDO, Microsoft has said it stores user biometrics on the device instead of on a cloud. In 2018, Microsoft announced that it would support logging into Windows 10 with FIDO 2 compatible devices, such as hardware keys made by Yubico.
We've been on a mission to eliminate passwords altogether. And we're focusing on passwordless login experience that's both secure and user-friendly. And we've seen a lot of success with our Authenticator app for consumer, and so we'll bring that to Azure AD.
Microsoft Authenticator is an app that allows users to take advantage of two-factor authentication on any device, not just those running Windows 10. Alex Simmons, vice president of Microsoft's Identity division, said in a tweet that the company has more than 80 million unique monthly users that sign in with a passwordless method. Apple's been encouraging the use of biometric authentication since it came out with Touch ID on the iPhone 5S back in 2013. The company called Touch ID the gold standard for consumer device biometric protection, until it introduced Face ID on the iPhone X in 2017.
And the data for Touch ID has been 1 in 50,000, meaning that the chance that a random person could use their fingerprint to unlock your iPhone has been about 1 in 50,000, and it's been great. So what are the similar statistics for Face ID? 1 in a million.
Back in 2016, Apple also introduced Auto Unlock, a feature for macOS.
Today, when you first approach your Mac to use it, the experience is something like this. You open it up, you're confronted with a password field, and then you type, and then maybe mistype, and then retype your password, and then you're in and using your Mac. But for many of us, we already have a device securely authenticated to our wrists that already knows who we are and could tell our Mac. And so then, when we opened our Mac, it could be a little bit more like this.
In its guidelines to app developers, Apple stresses that apps should support biometric authentication whenever possible, and that apps should only ask for a username and password as a fallback if the first method fails. Google has also been working to make passwords a thing of the past. The company has required its employees to use physical security keys since early 2017, and has seen a huge reduction in phishing. In August of 2018, the company released Titan to consumers. Titan is a physical key that allows users to take advantage of two-factor authentication on their computers or smartphones. In 2019, Google announced that phones running Android 7 would all come with a built-in security key using Bluetooth. A few months later, Google extended that function to iOS devices, meaning that iPhone and iPad users could now use their secondary Android smartphones as a security key whenever logging into their Google account on an iOS device. While Microsoft's Windows 10 devices and Google's new Android devices are FIDO 2 certified, Apple has been slower to adopt the standard in its products. Even though Touch ID and Face ID made biometric authentication the norm for unlocking our phones, Apple's devices are still not FIDO certified. But Apple is making strides.
Of late, Apple's been supporting FIDO technology both on iOS and on macOS. So the latest versions of their operating system support FIDO, meaning that if you're accessing a website that supports FIDO on an Apple device, you'll be able to leverage FIDO authentication as well.
The Department of Justice has also been moving away from password authentication. The agency adopted a single sign-on method back in 2017.
One of the reasons why passwords persist is that they are universal. They can be used by anyone. There are no limitations. There's no special hardware requirements. You don't have to have a certain kind of phone or a certain kind of laptop. Anyone can use passwords.
There are a few key challenges to really moving beyond being dependent on passwords. One of them is technical, right? And that's what FIDO has been seeking to address. And we've now created the technical standards that are web standards for authentication that is not dependent on password. Another challenge is behavioral. We've been trained with this risky way of authenticating using passwords. We'll have to be untrained to use simpler but new mechanisms for logging in. So I think there'll be some behavioral changes that need to take place, some education. The good news is these are changes for the better and for the simpler. And so we think that people will embrace these changes at the same time as the new technologies roll to market to enable us collectively on the whole to move beyond passwords.
Experts say that getting rid of the password will be a long journey, especially when it comes to getting people to ditch their bad habits.
The consumer approaches will be very much opt-in. In other words, if users actually want strong authentication, companies will be able to provide it to them, but just because it's available doesn't mean that every customer is going to go for it. You may now need to start collecting information about the user, like a mobile phone number that you need to use to communicate with them, and perhaps users don't want to provide that information or they're reluctant to. On the consumer side, I believe passwords will be slower to get rid of, which also means that the risk of breaches of consumer sites will persist for the foreseeable future.
As you can see, folks, having these types of alternatives to authenticate our passwords is something that all of us, all businesses and government agencies are concerned with and want to consider. We must keep one step ahead of these cyber fraudsters in protecting our data. Will this be good for our society? We'll know, and we'll know soon, because companies are coming out with this type of technology to see if this will work for us. In summary, folks, our best defense against this type of cyber attacks is through education. And we can start by training our employees on what to look for. And you could do that yourself by having your employees contact our company, Vanderson Cyber Group, and on our Patreon channel at MacJacksonJr.com. That's patreon.com/MacJacksonJr. Folks, again, should we ditch our passwords? Stay tuned. We'll be back after these messages. Hi, folks. I would like to welcome Ben Bowie from MyNiceTie.com as one of our newest sponsors for Cybersecurity Awareness TV. At MyNiceTie.com, they provide and are committed to providing classy neckties for the business community. At MyNiceTie.com, their motto is Wise Up, Suit Up, and Stand Up. You can find nice ties like the one I'm wearing now at MyNiceTies.com. Hi folks, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. In this segment, we call it Cybersecurity Tips that you could use to protect yourself, your business from cyber attacks. Stronger international cooperation has also required that in a way to combat these cyber crimes, they need to collaborate around the world with law enforcement and businesses. Because of the rise of the state-sponsored cyber attacks, international threats and laws has spawned a need to create treaties that governments around the world need to cooperate and enforce. We need to have these treaties set forth just like we have that's very similar to the international narcotics treaties and law enforcement around the world are doing. We need the same thing relating to cyber attacks and dealing with cyber crimes. So folks, our best way is a collaboration between law enforcement and with business. Our best defense, as I said always on the show, is through education and training our employees against these types of scams. Here's a couple suggestions you can do to protect yourselves. Again, folks, like we always say, make sure you have a strong password until we come out with a new type of password authentication we could use. Make sure that you have a password management system set in place. And I also recommend do not use one sign-on password where you have one sign-on and it uses it for every different website that you log into. The problem with that, folks, if your password is compromised, then your information can be exploited by cyber hackers. Also, in our show earlier today, there was a clip that we did by CNBC where one of the hackers talked about a website called WeLink, I think it is. I wanted you all guys to know that since that time of airing of that particular segment, the FBI has seized that website. So you cannot go on that website and see if your information has been stolen. Just also wanted you guys to check that. But you can do is go to a website called Have I Been Pwned? It's POWN, HaveIBeenPwned.com. And you can check to see if your username and your email address has been compromised or exploited on other different websites. Law enforcement, they are definitely working around the clock to seize and shut down websites that are publishing information about user IDs and passwords. Now, again, why this website was shut down by law enforcement is because it was like a Google search. You type in someone's email address, and what did you get, folks? You will get their passwords. That's right. Anyone you know, you type in their email address, and this website would tell you the passwords of that particular email address. Incredible. That website's been shut down. But with that said, there are other ones that have been popping up all over, and law enforcement are chasing them down and shutting them down as well. ISPs around the world are doing it. So that's the information, this tip for you folks. And that's our show for this week. I want to thank you all for being a part of Cybersecurity Awareness TV for this week. Folks, we've got to stay vigilant, stay cyber woke, and be on top of what's going on. You can find information about my show on YouTube and Facebook. And remember, if you are on YouTube and any of the social media, remember to share, like, and subscribe to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. But folks, one of the main things I want to share with you is that we are on Roku. That's right, folks. We're on the Roku network. You'll find us under WWDBTV. Look for Cybersecurity Awareness TV for previous episodes of our show. And remember, folks, as I say always, tell a friend. Stay cyber woke, folks. We'll see you next week. Thank you.